Welcome to a legendary episode of the CK Podcast. I got the band back, the Nevada Sagebrush, elite of the elites. Eric Uribe, Chris Boline. What's going on, brothers?
Man, I'm happy to be here. Reunion between the three of us. Last time we were all on camera together, I think maybe it was Brush Up, first ever episode. You debating whether Cap is elite or not. Me saying yes, you saying no. I think I came out the victor in that. I'll stand by that.
I won that shit. Chris,
I'll stand by that.
Yeah, I would say I'm probably about 15, 20 pounds lighter in that video, and just my whole fit was kind of horrendous in that video. So now I just had to bring out some heat, given the occasion. So, but Mr. Leo, thank you for having us on, man. It feels good to be on here.
Absolutely.
You have a better beard though than 5 years ago. However long that was, 6.
It's the quarantine beard. It's the reason for the season, baby.
Yeah, man.
There you go. And actually brought back the damn curls, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, the flow's back a little bit. Just, I knew this was coming. Yeah.
So I want to discuss The Last Dance. We'll get into detail what stood out to you guys the most, biggest takeaways, what didn't you like. There's a lot of speculation so far from Horace Grant, Scottie Pippen saying that they were portrayed negatively. We'll get into that and see what you guys think. Also, top 5 greatest teams of all time, y'all. This is going to be a debate. This is always a debate no matter what, right? Because it's always going to be subjective. We'll get into that as well. And a little bit of football. Dolphins, they're making some moves, but not really. And obviously the Raiders, man. Welcome to Las Vegas. That's all I got to say.
Wow.
But what have you guys done in terms of trying to stay in shape, or if you have tried to stay in shape during quarantine, man?
Yeah, Chris, you want to start us off?
Yeah, man. It's, a lot of good outdoor activities here in the Reno area. Just between hiking, bike rides, with the occasional Bud Light seltzer, mixed in. Shout out to Bud Light seltzer. I think just obviously that, I'm a big podcast guy, so I'll just put in my earbuds and go on a walk, man. Kind of get, my meditation on as well. But yeah, a lot of good hikes. Kind of bummed. Was going to go to Yosemite later this month, so that's kind of on hiatus right now with the girlfriend's family. But
nice.
But yeah, man, just kind of staying outdoors, man.
What about you, Eric?
See, me, I'm 6'2", 150 pounds soaking wet. So activity that I usually try to do is to beef up weight, which is weight training, not anything cardio related. And right now, since all the gyms are closed, that's kind of out of the picture. So not doing a lot of activity, honestly. Did come back to my hometown, though, the mean streets of Elko, Nevada. And that's got my spiritual energy back, being with my family. Yeah. So I'm good, man. Life's honestly good. We just found out some news at work that, our office is relocating to Florida. So I think last time I was on this podcast, I was in Wisconsin. Still work for East Bay, but we're going down to Bradenton in a couple months, which is, kind of exciting, but obviously some questions remain. But I'm looking forward to see what happens.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
One thing that you and I spoke off camera was I think you're going somewhere close to the Tampa Bay area back. I visited you in Orlando, but somehow Tom Brady seems to always haunt you, bro. Why does that happen to you?
I can't get rid of this guy, man. I don't know. He beats up my team for 20 years, the Dolphins, and now he's probably going to take over the entire state while I'm there. But, whatever. It should bring a little buzz to the city. I'm kind of excited to see what happens. Him and Gronk, it's going to be a fun time, I'm sure.
Yeah, they're going to reform the NWO with Hogan down there, dude. You know how it goes.
Yeah. Absolutely, man.
So
love the NWO reference on episode 10 of Last Dance, by the way, which we can get to later.
That's
on my list, bro. That's on my
list. Yeah.
That was dope. Man. But real quick before we continue, the way I've been staying in shape, Rebar sent me one of the alpha bars, and I'm playing the video now. Essentially, this thing is so versatile. It's convenient. You can take it on the go. A quick description of it is it's a portable neuromuscular training tool designed for athletic performance enhancement, pre-habilitation, therapeutic and active recovery, and for improving your overall freedom of mobility and movement. So in a nutshell, man, I highly recommend this. It's working on every part of your body. You can do legs, lower, biceps, shoulders. It's the real deal, and I highly endorse it. You guys can use our code COWBELL to get $5 off your purchase. So shout out to my guys at Rebar for sending me a great tool that I've been using to try to stay in shape, man. First and foremost, Eric, I'll start off with you. What was your biggest takeaway of The Last Dance?
I think going into the documentary, I was very familiar with the Jordan story, the Bull story, just reading different books, Jordan Rules, Playing for Keeps. So I think I already kind of knew the backstory, but I was really looking forward to just seeing kind of Jordan, his most raw form, just him behind the scenes, how he interacts with his teammates, coaches. And, I was not disappointed in the documentary in that aspect at all. I think that just the one thing that really, really stood out to me was just kind of the toll it took on him, just being kind of like a zoo animal for everybody, just always attracting a crowd, him always wanting to put on a show for the opposing fans that he was playing in front of. I mean, it just kind of made him, retire obviously that first time, but also like when he just started hanging out with his security guards, like those were like his best friends. Like I had no idea about that. Like that was really kind of his inner circle. And I remember there's an anecdote there where he's just in his his hotel room. He's like, I can't go anywhere, so I just sit down because literally there's nowhere for me to go without drawing a crowd. So, obviously I kind of already understood that, but just to see that come to life through the documentary and the narrative story, it was really fascinating for sure.
What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I think other than obviously Rodzilla and WCW giving Karl Malone. Well, I don't know if it was Malone gave Rodman the diamond cutter, I think, later on at Bashful Beach.
Yeah.
They didn't show. So that was a great anecdote. But yeah, just, Wright Thompson wrote a piece for ESPN about kind of just the backstory of Jordan in North Carolina and just generations in general, even from the colonial era. And I think to Eric's point, how, he was such a larger than life character and how everyone wanted to be like Mike. It was pretty fascinating to see, just how he kind of had that close-knit circle. I'm kind of bummed they didn't really go into details about him throwing a ball at Bill Cartwright's head after he got traded for Charles Oakley. But, yeah, exactly. It was, I think, interesting how they told a story that's kind of been mentioned multiple times over and over. But at the same time, kind of made it refreshing. You have the anecdote with him on the iPad listening to Gary Payton's, how the glove locked him down, and basically MJ was just like scoffed at it. And I think just how it kind of captured kind of the hearts of everybody during this quarantine right now. They're missing sports. So it was kind of a cool thing to be able to have that unifying thread, which is kind of a bummer. It's not going to be on Sundays for anymore. So.
No, that's awesome. For me, the biggest takeaway, and I've said this on multiple shows, I think, was their GM, Jerry Krause, that dynamic with MJ and Scottie Pippen, and how I would think about it in today's NBA, how that would be a no-no in today's NBA, how it just on so many levels, from the players' perspective and from the front office perspective. Today, we know it's a players' league. Coaches get fired left and right. Front offices get fired left and right. But for some reason, this dude had, like, the holy blessing of the owner, right? And he essentially did what he wanted. But he also knew that he would get a lot of shit from guys like Scottie and MJ. MJ couldn't stand him. I just thought that dynamic was so entertaining, the way he was just talk shit to him consistently. I was like, bro, can you imagine De'Aaron Fox or Buddy Hield just talk straight smack to Vlade Divac, or it just put LeBron talking all this smack to like Rob Pelinka. To me, that really stood out, and it showed how different the eras are, right? And how much our game has transitions is just a players' league, and we're seeing it now with LeBron, Kawhi, Steph all getting together and saying, you know what, we want basketball back. And their voices are the strongest, and their voices are the ones that will be heard. So I think that dynamic for me was really it was eye-opening, honestly. And it's cool to see different stuff from different eras, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it just kind of shows. I mean, you talk about the bad boy Pistons, to the Davis brothers on the Pacers teams, just a lot more physical. And I mean, that's a whole can of worms too with Isaiah and the Dream Team that
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
forgot about. That that's a whole other issue. That's what I mean. Almost 30 years later, that they're still arguing over, which is pretty crazy to
Yeah.
see.
MJ holds a grudge though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I didn't believe him when
exactly.
he said he wasn't involved on him not being part of the team.
Yeah.
I think that's a little revisionist history, but I felt some of the documentary was that, but we can get into that later.
Right. So I mean, let's just slide right into that. You said it was
Okay.
some revisionist history, right? And even players like Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant already came out saying that they portrayed MJ to be this insane God figure. And it seems like that point, that Isaiah thing, that whole dynamic was no, MJ didn't want him on the team. And at the point, at that point, Isaiah was one of the best point guards in the game, and he rightfully deserved to be on that team. But talk about what you guys think about Horace Grant coming out and essentially calling MJ a snitch for that cocaine, part. And then
Yeah.
the other part, what was the other part where he came out and said something about him? You guys there? You guys there?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, cut
All
off
right.
for a second.
All right. All right.
But if I could kind of talk a little bit about that. So, usually when you get these two very extreme stories, Horace Grant, saying, "Oh, I wasn't a source at all," and MJ saying, "Oh, he was the source." I think the truth is usually in the middle. I'm sure Horace provided some good notes for Sam Smith and the Jordan rules, but I don't think he was alone. I'm sure most of his teammates and executives were willing to share some stories, because if you really read that book, Jordan was just not a popular guy that first year, and that whole team was just kind of dysfunctional. So that kind of speaks just to his greatness, so that they figured it out and won it all. But I don't know, just kind of when it comes to the documentary as a whole, if I put on my journalism hat real quick, it is a little biased. Maybe not little's an understatement, but I mean, the documentary, I mean, the footage was like in a vault somewhere for 20 years because MJ didn't want it coming out, like that was the agreement when they filmed that, like they wouldn't release it without his blessing. So, obviously he has his fingers in this, I'm sure he had some approval process over it or was just heavily involved. But I think, I was I kind of felt for Jerry Krause, he is the villain of this series, and he is definitely to blame for some of it. But I think he didn't get his fair shake out of it. Like towards the end of it, you can see Scottie really apologizes to him, or maybe doesn't apologize, but kind of gives him credit, saying he was a great GM, kind of put his grudge behind him. But I don't think I ever saw that at MJ throughout the documentary, which makes sense. I mean, we all know MJ is this big grudge holder. I mean, that's what made him great. But nonetheless, I mean, Jerry's gone now. He died a couple of years ago, and it seems like Jordan was still just trying to jab him throughout that documentary. I mean, they really show a lot of different clips of him making fun of his stature, saying, "Oh, don't smoke those; it'll stunt your growth," or "Don't." Or what are those pills? Are they diet pills? Or are they short pills? Something like that. So,
Classic.
and that's Jordan. That's what made him so great. But I would just being the human myself, like, would you let go of that a little bit? You guys won 6 titles. This guy's dead now. I mean, he's got a family. Like, so that's one thing that kind of caught me off guard just watching it.
And real quick before you say something, Chris, to your point about people talking, besides Horace, me being in the position that I am today, one thing I will say, people love to talk. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah.
No, I mean, obviously, Krause has the all-time, offensive nickname in Crumbs. I mean, geez, I mean, it's tough. But I mean, Eric, to your point, I mean, Horace Grant went on, pardon my take, another podcast, and basically was like, all of those players were talking to Sam Smith. I mean, Sam Smith was in a documentary. I mean, I think he had a really strong rapport with a lot of these players to kind of get through these, anecdotes about how MJ is as a player. And I mean, that's just who he is. That's why he's the greatest of all time, because how tenacious he was and how, he would hold grudges, whether they were real or they weren't real. I think that, I mean, Krause did kind of get the short end of the stick. Unfortunately, it's tough because he didn't do himself a whole lot of favors, but I think that there is, yeah, I mean, Eric, the journalism hat, I mean, kind of being unbiased on both ends. I mean, if you really, want to get kind of more of a balanced take, then I guess the Jordan rules might probably be the best one. But,
yeah,
I think for what it was just kind of an exciting kind of look back. And, they did kind of talk about, his gambling issues and, some of the other things that he had issues with. Initially, during the first 2 episodes, I thought, oh man, this is going to be like the MJ puff piece and everything. But I mean, they did, kind of, I think illuminate some other things, but I think it was still kind of more protected. But yeah, I mean, Krause unfortunately just couldn't get out of his own way. I mean, he wanted to blow the team up. He had the baby bulls after that, with Eddie Curry and Tyson Chandler. But I think that, they were still just the greatest dynasty perhaps of all time. Not kind of, in that realm of like those Celtics teams.
No doubt.
So, yeah.
How did you guys feel about a lot of these journalists at the time wanting to make a story out of his dad dying because of his gambling issues? I thought that was an embarrassment from a journalistic standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Go ahead,
Chris. You got it, bro.
I was going to say, well, there's a Netflix documentary that I'm kind of watching, and it's just kind of like, the whole media, sensationalizing everything. I mean, you have like the OJ trial in the 90s, which I think was around when kind of around that time. I want to say like 1994, where it just kind of was the story beyond the story. But yeah, I mean, linking that to somebody's, life that's so personal and so just in the public. I mean, that's definitely something that I think could be a little bit more handled more carefully. But the Netflix documentary, it's a trial by media, and it basically just goes over how, these stories can really just affect people's lives. I mean, the first story is about Jenny Jones in reality TV and just kind of affecting all these different people from walks of life. But I mean, not a good look, on most ends.
Yeah. I think that's like an interesting case study, Jordan, in just the 90s period where sports became more than sports. At least in America, it became more entertainment. And the outside stuff became the bigger news stories. And that's ushered into what you see today. I mean, free agency is a hot button topic. I mean, we're asking Kawhi Leonard in the middle of the finals where he's going to sign. So I think, you can kind of really trace it back to that time period. And then when sports, the way it's been covered, just started shifting. And, MJ being MJ, he was just the top example of that. And it's definitely a cheap shot to make that connection.
Yep.
I'm just curious how many people actually connected his gambling problems to the murder. If there was only a couple of journalists, then maybe they just kind of put a black eye on the whole industry. But I'm not sure if it was the media at large that was portraying it that way. But again, I was very small at that time period, so I can't speak to that.
Yeah. And I think still kind of being in the business, we do sensationalize shit because at the end of the day, people want clicks. And even then, it wasn't the clicks, right? But it was like a way of getting attention. And that was their way of selling advertisements on TV and so on. So hate to say it, but we do sensationalize a lot of stuff. We have our favorites just like anybody else. I'll be the first to admit that. There is always a little bit of bias into what we do. But I think that's just being human, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right. So we talked about Jerry. We talked about Michael's dad a little bit. Was there something that you weren't happy with in the documentary?
I would have liked a little bit more into Phil Jackson. I think they kind of just glossed over him. Like, Pippen got his own episode. Rodman got his own episode. Phil was kind of in that Rodman episode, but they didn't really explain too much. And, me just being a Lakers guy, reading some stuff into Phil Jackson. He's just a fascinating figure. He was just so unconventional for an unconventional team, which was perfect. But, just some of the interests he has, like Zen Buddhism and Native American culture and philosophy. Like, I would have loved to learn more about that, how he got that, and how he put that into this franchise. Because I think the thing about Phil, I mean, what he's the best at is just ego management. You know, when you're dealing with Kobe Bryant's of the world, the Shaqs of the world,
Right.
Michael Jordan's of the world, like that's just as important as the X's and O's. So I would have loved a little bit more backstory into him, just because he's so fascinating, and just see kind of his perspective, how it was dealing with all this rift in the organization, him being actually part of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably say, and Phil's a great example, and I know, Eric, you kind of had your brush in with him in scenic Elko, Nevada.
Yeah.
You were telling me this might be for another episode, but no, I think I'm going to kind of go off the beaten path. I know it was the Last Dance, but I mean, I kind of wanted to see a little, bonus episode on the Wizards. I mean, maybe wasn't enough time for that. It wasn't in the context of it, but it would have been interesting to see, just him kind of going through that period of his life. The old Bighorns head coach, Derek Martin, who played point guard in the NBA and he played at UCLA. He had a couple MJ stories that, about him playing pickup games on the court, set of Space Jam. So, I mean, that was kind of a fun anecdote that he told us. And actually, I don't know, might be in Playing for Keeps, but, there's a famous MJ Martin story where, Derek kind of was chirping in his ear and then MJ kind of went off. So, I mean, other than, the offshoot of the Wizards era, I don't really think there was kind of anything about that. Well, I guess you could go into the rabbit hole of, his impact on the later generations like AI and Kobe and those guys. So,
but if I could hook into that comment, it's interesting, he bashed Jerry Krause so much, but, his reputation as an executive GM hasn't been very good, obviously. I mean, the Wizards era. Yeah, I mean, Kwame Brown, infamous bust, probably one of the worst picks of all time.
He got small hands, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, Adam Morrison with the number 3 overall pick of the Bobcats. So, and I don't think the Bobcats have even won like a playoff series since he's been owner or anything like that. So, it just kind of puts in perspective maybe Krause's accomplishments. Like it actually was kind of hard, despite having the best player of all time. Still putting the pieces around him was no sure thing.
So to that point, I kind of read today that the reason why he hasn't really expanded outside of, say, hiring the right basketball people is because he's always hired his friends and people in that area of North Carolina because of that death experience and because of all the accusations of him gambling and him not really trusting people. So a lot of the big problem is that he's afraid to hire people outside of his circle that he's not really comfortable with. And again, this is a business. You're going to get judged on wins and losses. And if he doesn't start hiring the right people, then he's always going to fail. And I think where half of it, you can be like, well, that makes sense, right? People have betrayed him in that sense, and he wants to keep a small circle. But the other sense is like, no, like you need to have a successful franchise. And the Hornets have been a joke just for a long time, which we can transition into the biggest question. How many points would Jordan average in today's NBA?
I'll let Eric go first.
It's so tough to say, right? Because, I mean, I'm sure if you look back at his 3-point percentage, it's nothing out of this world.
Yeah.
But just Jordan being Jordan, if he was in this era, he would work on that shot nonstop till he's one of the best. Man, it's really tough to say. I think it's just impossible to compare eras. I know we're going to talk about best teams of all time in a little bit, but yeah, really, when you were just watching that documentary, that's another thing you just noticed. The game's just done a complete 180. I mean, it felt so slow. While it was physical and rough, I mean, it was just so small. Just the pace. It was just so different.
People weren't as athletic,
that's
right?
kind of my cop-out answer. Yeah, that's my cop-out answer. I legit don't know, but Jordan being Jordan, I'm sure he would have evolved to this time period and still been the all-time great.
Yeah.
Whoa, really?
I think so.
Uh-oh.
I think so.
I mean, I'll echo that. Just I know LeBron's built like a tank and he can play tight end for the Cowboys, but I think MJ, just the way that he's psychologically the way that the way MJ's psychologically built, I think, is just a way different from a lot of the players today. I'm sure he would still subtweet his teammates, but I think also just like the way he approaches the game. I mean, Kobe really learned from him, so that's probably the most applicable comparison. So something along those stat lines. And I think that he probably wouldn't be as banged up as he was kind of near the end. I mean, back in 1998, I mean, you can just kind of see, I mean, him just super fatigued in the locker room outside the game where he's just playing quarters with his security team, which, I don't think it's enough credit. I mean, playing the quarters game to throw it and see who gets closest to the wall without hitting it. But I think that, I mean, his stat line, I think it probably was around 32%, 3-point percentage career, just kind of something along that neighborhood. But to Eric's point, I think he's just a lunatic. I mean, he would probably make sure that it wasn't a weakness in his game.
Will there be another player in our history, in our lifetime, that will win 6 out of 8 championships?
I think gut reaction for me is no. I think that's just, it's uber competitive, Leo, as you pointed out, and everybody top to bottom. I think you have the youth basketball system that, some of these kids are coming out the womb and they're like getting bred to be players. It wasn't like that back in the day. I mean, so I think just for the time period, I mean, there's never going to be another, Red Auerbach Celtics like that, top to bottom.
I'm gonna go on a limb and say yes. I just feel kids come into the league a little earlier today, so someone's just gonna come in here and just take over from like day one and just start a dynasty with a couple other young bucks. I mean, we saw Kobe get pretty close. He had 5, right? I think someone will match 6. I'm not sure when, but I feel like it'll happen because I don't know. Just when I've been watching NBA, it seems like it's always the same franchise, the same players dominating. So I think one will break through and at least tie Jordan.
Okay, and my hot take for the Cowbell Kingdom podcast is going to be the Sacramento Kings. That's who it's going to be.
De'Aaron Fox, yes.
Shout out
Fox
to Texas,
the Eldridge
man.
State.
No, Luka, Giannis, do you think those guys have it in them to win 5-6 championships?
No, and that's no disrespect to them, but I think to accomplish that, you got to be like GOAT level. And, those guys are, they'll be all timers for sure, but best of all time or top 5, I don't see that.
I see Giannis being top 5 or even best of all time if he just gets his jump shot ready.
Hey, my people out in Wisconsin will love that. I'll share this show. They'll cut that up into pieces, share that on social. You just got 1,000 extra views, man.
Oh my gosh! Is there a player that stands out to you, Chris, right now that you're thinking, man, that guy is it, or has he not came out yet? Maybe in Reno, is there someone making a player in Reno right now that's like cooking?
Yeah, obviously the illustrious basketball factory known as Reno High. I mean, we're always pumping out, average
go Huskies! Shout out Huskies!
Average size white boys, So I would say, I mean, Luka, I think just the way that he approaches the game, obviously, Giannis is in there. I just, I'm a Kings guy, so I'm pulling for Fox just because I think he's so quick and he's so entertaining to watch. I mean, I think just the way that the league is structured, it's so difficult too to assemble a quality team year in and year out based off the salary. You can look at the NFL. I mean, the Chiefs are uber competitive right now, but they're going to go in salary cap hell once they give. I don't know if they gave Mahomes already the contract of the century. He's earned it. But it's so hard and difficult to keep kind of that core group together. So I mean, Kawhi Leonard leaving the Raptors, I mean, that could have been a good nucleus, but I think that the way the league has changed, I mean, you could kind of go into the whole banana boat logistics of everything, guys linking up with their buddies, there's so many different variables, but I think Giannis, Leo, as you point out, is just him and Luka are kind of the next wave, I think.
Watch out for Jalen Green as well. I'm really high on that kid.
I knew you'd say that too. Fresno
Yeah.
product, huh?
Yeah, man. Northern California always produces the best talent, right, Leo?
No doubt. How do you guys feel about the G League taking a big chunk of change from the NCAA now? Or potentially?
You know, I don't think NCAA basketball will fall by the wayside because I do think it's, the teams, the programs kind of run that, like I watch Nevada basketball just for the program because it's my alma mater.
Yeah.
Sure, you get once in a while some transformational athlete like a Zion that just attracts all the eyeballs. But, I definitely see a lot of these top talent, going to the G League, or I know in a couple of years they might go straight to the NBA. But I think actually that'd make the NCAA tournament even more fun to watch, like more upsets, just more crazy things happening. So, I don't think NCAA basketball will become irrelevant, but they definitely will probably lose some of that top talent.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm obviously biased. I'm a huge proponent of the G League. I
Shout out Big Horns.
Shout out Big Horns. Horns up for life, baby. But I think that was always just a bastion of really strong talent. I mean, Montrezl Harrell, used to play for the Rio Grande Valley Vipers. The Bighorns were really strong,
Yeah.
Danny Green. I mean, they just had a really strong list of just really accomplished players. I mean, you'd look over some nights, back in the day, and Tyler Hansborough, Psycho T, would be playing. He was a little long in the long in the tooth, but I think that it's also, it's a capitalist market.
Yeah.
I think that the NCAA is, kind of profited off of athletes for a really long time. Yep. The coaches have really exorbitant salaries. I mean, Coach K's salary is pretty up there. Coach Calipari's as well. So I think that they're making a business decision for themselves and their families at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I think that, to Eric's point too, will be Nevada might have more of a competitive opportunity. They don't need to have 5 redshirt seniors get together just so they could make a run.
Yeah.
So I think it's an exciting opportunity, but I think there are other leagues where, I mean, soccer is a great example of these leagues that are incorporating their youth athletes into the pro ranks.
Luka Doncic is the best example to me. He's been playing professional for a long time. He came into the league and he took the league by storm. There's no secret. You learn fundamentals, you get stronger, and I think it's the right approach for these younger kids. Like if my kid, hopefully, once I make a kid, and his name will be Kobe. Eric knew this before I got married, before he passed away. God bless his soul. That I was gonna name my kid Kobe. That's how much respect I have for him. But so Kobe Bias will be in the NBA. First God.
Love to hear it, man.
And he's not going to Nevada unless they give us money under the table, which I may have to take.
Where's he going, man? Where do you want him going?
I mean, I think the G League, like if they have a team stay in LA, I wouldn't mind staying there for a year. My kid getting stronger, being around great coaches. Hopefully I'm coaching by that time too, so we'll see what happens. Let's move on to top 5 greatest NBA teams of all time. And I'm going to preface this, right, by saying that in my top 5, there is a 95-96 Bulls, which I didn't really get to watch because I'm not old enough. I was born in 93, so let's put that out there. But we've watched documentaries. The 86-87 Lakers, again, wasn't born yet, but we've seen those Netflix documentaries. And then the 85-86 Celtics. So the only teams that are in my top 5 that I really watched are the 01-02 Kings and the 16-17 Warriors. That's right, Eric.
Get the Kings off that. Get them out of there, man.
Get them out of there.
Automatically, your list
Tim
discredited.
Donaghy robbed the Kings, and you know it. You know this. That's why he's in jail, or he was in jail.
Tim Donaghy did miss every shot in Game 7. He did miss a wide open shot, Peja Stojakovic. No. You guys had your chance in Game 7 at home.
Rest in peace, David Stern. He said Game 6 was the worst officiated game in NBA history. Till this day, it's still the worst game ever.
Yeah, I don't deny Game 6. I mean, for sure. But Game 7, it was a fair chance.
There was no Game 7. There should have never been a Game 7.
Yeah, that's kind of like, you know, the NBA lottery when, you know, Ewing was getting drafted and apparently there was the cold envelope. That's kind of the, you know,
Yeah.
All
yeah.
right, so
I think that could be another list, best what if teams, you know, and then my 2006, 2007 Chargers would be right in there. So
facts, big facts. So that's my list: the 95-96 Bulls, 16-17 Warriors, 86-87 Lakers, 85-86 Celtics, and the 01-02 Kings. What do you guys? How do you guys feel about that list?
It's really tough for me to speak to the teams that are before my era.
Right.
Because, yeah, I
That's
mean,
my point.
like
Yeah.
you said, I've seen the documentaries. I get they're good, but I never watched them, so I really don't know how good they were, how much more dominant they were in their era. You know, I'll take people's word for it, but I just really have never seen a team more talented than that 2016, 2017 Warriors team.
Never. Yeah.
yeah.
At least in my era, since when I started watching basketball in 2002, there's no team that comes close to them. I mean, you got the best shooting tandem backcourt of all time. You know, Kevin Durant, I think he's probably going to end up being a top 15, top 10 guy all time.
The 01-02 Kings are the closest thing to them.
No, I think, yeah, like a lot of people were talking about, you know, well, a lot of people were comparing that Bulls team to them. I mean, just from a talent standpoint, I think the Warriors just blow them out of the water.
But the Kings were the Warriors before the Warriors were the Warriors, though. Like, the Kings were the show on the court. They were the entertainment. I mean, stop it.
Hey, they never won a ring. I mean, they're great what if story, but
yeah,
they didn't have three like all timers on their team, you know, at the same time. So
yeah, I think
a little bit of revisionist history from Leo here as well. You know, not just the Last Dance. We're seeing it both ways.
Winning a world title and then Eric, like you said, adding a top 10 player of all time just kind of says it all to just the combined star power for that team. But shout out to the Kings, though. I mean, shout out to my Chris Webber and Jason Williams used to be neighbors to my cousins in Sac, so shout out to them and the Lamberts. But I think those early 2000s Lakers, man, I mean, it's Shaq at the peak of his powers. I think it's kind of hard to argue with that. Kobe is kind of the proverbial Robin before he took off. I mean, that's hard. And then those Lakers teams, Lakers Celtics back in the 80s, I mean, the gluttony of riches that those Celtics teams had. I mean, when you have a guy like Bill Walton coming off the bench, an MVP guy for the Trailblazers, it's hard to compete. And then that's even, another, I think the most applicable comparison to the Warriors winning the world championship was like after the Celtics won the world championship, I forget which year in the 80s, they had Len Bias potentially coming on, but then he unfortunately had an overdose of cocaine. So I think just like that's the only, comparison I would have to those Warriors teams. I mean, the 72 win Bulls, I mean, that's probably going to go down because they won the title at the end of the day. But I think pound for pound, the Warriors of our era were probably the best, I think, all time.
Yeah. I think when you're looking at best teams of all time, you really got to compare them only to their era. Like, how much did they dominate the competition? Like, that first Warriors team with Durant, I mean, I think they lost one playoff game to the Cavs. I mean, which is just an incredible run. I know the Lakers' second championship, they also only lost one game, which I think is just unheard of to just go on a run like that against the stiffest competition. So that's where I really rank those teams. Like, I do have a top five, but I only have top five of my era. Should I share that or no?
Go ahead.
Okay, let me pull it up here. This is tough exercise for sure. So, number one, like I said, 2017 Warriors. Then after that, I have the 2000-2001 Lakers that beat Allen Iverson in the finals. Then I got the 2018 Celtics. I think that team is kind of glossed. Yeah, of my era. I'm only looking at, okay? But I think that team was completely glossed over. I mean, 3 Hall of Famers, team that could just shoot lights out. They could play defense lights out. I thought they're the third best team, at least of my era.
Over the Spurs?
Right.
Well, they're next. I got the 13-14 Spurs after that. And then lastly, I'm pulling a Leo here. I'm picking a team that didn't win the title, 2018 Rockets, that took the all-team Warriors team
Big
to
facts.
7.
They're really
So
good.
that's my top 5 of at least like the 2000 era on up.
Mm-hmm.
Is
You
that a
didn't pick
good
any of
list?
LeBron's teams.
Yeah, I was thinking about the Heat teams, but honestly, I don't think any of those 5 or any of those teams would beat these 5.
I'm talking about when you had Zdrunas Ilgauskas as his center, dude.
Yeah, and Chris Birdman Anderson. Like, I look back on that era.
You're
I'm
saying
like,
that Heat team was not better than that Celtics team? You're crazy.
No, I don't think so.
Oh,
Remember that
gosh.
old Celtics team almost beat them? They took them to 7 games on their last legs. That was like 4 or 5 years after their championship. Yes. You remember that, right?
I do. They was just toying with them, though.
No way. No way. Not at all. You don't do that in the playoffs. So you're telling me that same team 4 years younger couldn't have beat those teams?
No.
Definitely, man. Tony Allen playing some lockdown defense. Like, he would have at least, contained LeBron. Like I said, 2008 Celtics completely overlooked in history. That's another hot take of mine. And they beat my Lakers that year, so that's me being bias-free.
What do you think, Chris?
I think Eric's kind of got my list. I kind of just did decades of teams of top eras. I think, the Bad Boy Pistons gets overlooked. I think just Eric's point about just being the best at that time.
Yeah.
I think another team, too, that kind of gets overlooked is the back-to-back Houston Rockets.
That was a good one.
With the Olajuwon, Young, Sam Cassell, Clyde Drexler.
Robert Horry.
Big Shot Rob.
That's right.
But I think, Eric, I think people still have, that was the first big 3 was Ray Allen, KG, and the Truth. So
they were so good.
Perkins and Rondo. Yeah. I kind of wish there was some more, Sacramento Proud teams in there, but that's okay.
Hey, no, that Rockets team though, God, like in any other season, like that team would have won championships. It's just they're as good as that 01-02 Kings team. Like those two teams would have been just going at it, man, for sure.
That Game 7 they lost to the Warriors. Everyone knows obviously Chris Paul didn't play, but just the amount of threes they missed that game. It was like a historic amount of threes. Like, it was an all-time cold streak that they went on, and they still barely lost that game. So, it's just tough to put them on all-time lists when you don't win it. That's why I can't put them, and I can't put the Kings on there either.
Yeah, but the Kings have a big asterisk. They got robbed, and that's different. There's a difference between missing shots and actually getting robbed. Like, players miss shots, but when you get robbed the way they did, man, that hurts. And I still can't get over it today, man. I still can't get over it today.
There's no robbing when Vlade Divac gives the perfect pass to Robert Horry.
That was Game 4, though.
Well, he shouldn't have done that to begin with.
Oh my God!
You throw that in the air or something like that.
No,
it was the perfect tap in. Maybe he had money on the game. You ever thought about that?
No, back then we didn't have instant replay, and if you go back to that game,
Samaki Walker,
half court shot, it just didn't have counted.
I remember that, but. That was a sign of the times. Like, again, Game 7, you guys had a fair chance at home, and no one showed up to play besides Mike Bibby. Shout out Mike Bibby. I know he's buff now, but
shout out to Mike Bibby, man. Is there anything you guys would like? I know you wanted to talk about the whole WWE reference to The Last Dance. Go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah, and apologies on the technical difficulties, guys. Skype kind of really kills my battery. No, I think that I think that maybe deserves its own 30 for 30 as professional athletes in pro wrestling. I don't think there's a more. The fact that Rodman was going to, I think it was Michigan, I think it was Auburn Hills to go to a taping of Nitro, smoking cigars with Hollywood Hulk Hogan, complete with that 5 o'clock shadow, in the middle of all this I mean, probably one of the most pressure-filled seasons of all time. I mean, could you imagine something like that happening today? I mean, the best thing we get is, Pac-Man Jones going to TNA, when he was on, I think,
He would never live that down.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw what happened to Odell Beckham a week before a playoff game. He goes on a boat in Miami, and he just gets killed for it. Little less leaving in the middle of the finals for a wrestling show. Would have never, ever flown today. Just another thing, just how much the game's changed. But, one thing actually I want to ask Chris, man, I want to ask you about that soundtrack, dude, because I know you're a big late 80s, early 90s rap guy. Like, just give us your overall thoughts on the Last Dance soundtrack, man.
I think, it passes the girlfriend test. Shout out to me getting a girlfriend. It's like, at
Judy
one point,
approved. Shout out.
Yeah,
Judy.
At one point, Judy starts doing, up downs, and I'm like, what are you doing? And it's kind of like when you're, initially introduced to like NFL films. I remember back then I used to just get like jacked up. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. So I think it was exciting for everybody, and the soundtrack definitely was a part of that. Wright Thompson had an anecdote in his ESPN story about, how Serious by the Alan Parsons Project just set the tone for every Bulls game. And I think that kind of is up there with like any of the greatest wrestling entrances of all time. But yeah, I mean, when you have a Tribe Called Quest and you have all these kind of different iconic sounds of that era, along with, the crescendo of like, okay, let's just do the best highlight reel of Mike windmilling on literally everybody in the NBA. I think that's kind of a recipe for success. But yeah, no, seriously, I mean, the way the Chicago Bulls announcer would announce that starting five, it makes you want to go back and be a part of that era.
Oh, absolutely. Leo, what about you, man? Any other thoughts about the documentary?
Not really. Besides that Wizards part, I want to know more because I think that was closer to us. But other than that, though, I thought it was a great series. I'm still kind of thinking about what Scottie Pippen said, what Horace said. Makes me think about how much truth there was to it and how much they kept back. Like you guys said, maybe Michael hid some shit that he didn't want to get to be public, and that like my curiosity always kicks in. Like, man, like what if, or what didn't we really get right? What if it was done by a third party company and not ESPN? So those type of things always cross my mind.
Winners write history, man, and Michael Jordan is the biggest winner of that era or of all time. Honestly, he kind of gets to write the story, so it's interesting to observe from afar.
Like my shirt says, "Fuck it, we deserve this win," and I think MJ got that right.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I was a big fan of the Kobe episode.
Oh, I cried.
Like I
bro.
I thought it was fascinating. You have all these grown men talking about a 19-year-old that just wants to play one-on-one with them. Like that just speaks to Kobe. At 19, he already had everybody's attention. He was already on everybody's radar, and he really wanted to go at Mike that game. He was a big opportunity for him to learn and better himself. Like, while everyone else kind of treats the All-Star game as a sideshow, like that was another opportunity for him to get good.
Shows how great he was, man. And as both you and I, Eric, have talked about, I think Kobe affected the world globally. I wouldn't say he's better than MJ, but I just feel like his impact just on Earth is just immense, right?
Absolutely, man. It was a sad day, January 26th.
Yeah, I think that's unfortunately one of those moments where you remember where you were when it happened, was when Kobe passed away. And I think it just, I mean, his impact, MJ's impact kind of just permeates to all walks of life.
Yep.
Is there anything else you guys would like to add before I let you guys go? We're almost at the hour mark. Appreciate you guys' time, and we got to do this again for sure.
We have to, man. This has been an awesome reunion. The big three, Sports Brush. So thanks a bunch for having us, giving us this platform to just shoot the crap and talk it out, man.
Yeah, thanks, Leo. It's nice to reunite, and then we'll have to do an NFL, preview podcast where we just break down the
Big fat.
Dolphins, Raiders, and the Bolts. Yeah.
So real quick about the Dolphins, though, I wasn't happy that they got
Comeback
Tua.
season.
I mean,
Oh man, I was ecstatic.
I think he's injury prone, bro. I'm sorry. I knock on wood or on glass, but I don't know, man. I'm concerned.
I think with me at least, I'm sure the organization. I mean, we're scarred because we said that about Drew Brees. Oh, he's injured, and then we saw how that played out. So I don't know if they wanted to make that same mistake twice, but I feel Tua. If he learns how to throw the ball away, not to hit the home run on every single play, take the check down, I think he'll be fine. Because most of the time he got hurt was he was just running around trying to make a play out of nothing. So something I think he'll probably learn just going through that process. People telling him that he's injury prone. I think he'll turn around, and I definitely think we got the best quarterback of the draft. And I don't know if Chris agrees or not, but
Eric, I was going to have
years.
Follow-up question: the Miami Dolphins more talented than the Alabama Crimson Tide?
Ooh man, I'm gonna take the Dolphins, bro.
Who's getting paid more, the Crimson Tide or the Dolphins, dude?
Oh, Tide for sure, man. Saban got that booster money on deck, dude.
Yeah.
Some Ozark shit, man, laundering it. I say that allegedly for legal purposes, by the way. Nobody come at my neck. Yeah, for
Ozark. Shout out to Ozark, one of the best shows out there.
Yeah.
Did you guys watch Money Heist?
I have not. Man. What is that?
So Money Heist was the #1 Netflix when it came out maybe a month ago, but highly recommend you guys to watch it. Watch it in Spanish and put the subtitles in English. But if you want to watch it in English, you can too. I just feel like because it was filmed in Spain, so it takes that cultural portion out of the show. Even like my cousin E-Man, who doesn't speak Spanish, he's like, I just thought it was so much better in Spanish than it was in English. Like I didn't like it in English, and then he the subtitles, and he just read. Like it's part of the show. So recommend that. And real quick, do you think he'll be as good as Lamar Jackson or somewhere close to that? Because I'm not a big fan of Lamar Jackson, to be completely honest with you.
Is Tua going to be better than Lamar?
Yeah.
Tua. Yeah. I think my gut reaction is I listen, when Lamar was lighting up Florida State when he was at Louisville, and I think he kind of took Clemson to the brink. That might have been the season they won the national title. I mean, he kind of carried that offense. And I mean, my beloved Bolt shut him down, by putting, running like the dime Madden defense with 60 beats to chase him down. But I think that he's just such an electric player. And I think he had, Michael Vick versions 1 and 2 to see how to operate an offense, effectively. I think he's kind of got the fire under his ass. Everyone's saying that he should be a wide receiver or running back. And Lamar, I mean, has kind of been doing the damn thing. I think, there's still the lingering health concerns over Tua's hip. I mean, I think Bo Jackson is like one of the only other guys to come back like a broken hip, something like that. So I think the jury's still out a little bit.
And he may be the best athlete of all time, period.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Tua will definitely be better than Lamar, in my opinion.
Wow.
And I like Lamar. I mean, he did some record-setting things last year that people just kind of glossed over, but just accuracy of Tua is just on another level. Just how he throws with precision, throws receivers open. Like, it's very Drew Brees-like, and I think a lot of people make that comparison. But, even the Russell Wilson, just how he can kind of maneuver around in the backfield and make plays out of nothing. So as long as he stays healthy, I have no doubts about his skill set. But, yeah, the health is his main concern right now.
All right, cool. So let's end it there before we get into a whole NFL talk and the Raiders win the championship next year. That's all I got to say, man.
Yeah, Leo, thanks for having us, man. I had a blast.
All right, y'all. Thank you guys so much. Make sure to leave us a review on iTunes. You can listen to this on Spotify as well. And if you guys want to rewatch it on YouTube, go ahead. We'll have a bunch of curated content on social media, different parts of the show here and there. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you guys on the next one.